So in this video, I'm going to kind of walk you through what it's like to track songs for clients when they come into a space. On this channel, I talk a lot about remote sessions, and based on what happened the past year, remote sessions became really popular, but now in-person sessions are starting to become normal again. And I figured with this video, I'm just gonna walk you through and kind of tell you what I do and what happens for my specific studio when I have people in the room with me when I'm tracking. So the morning of whenever I have a session, it kind of always looks the same. I come downstairs and the first thing that I do is I turn everything on, make sure everything's operating correctly. Before the session and everything else, I will normally have a producer email me demos from Dropbox or Google Drive, and I'll download them and I'll put them in the session. And then once that happens and I have a session made in Pro Tools, I'll go back over by the drum set where I can, one, make sure that the tempo and everything is lined up correctly, and I have all the markers that I need in each section of the Pro Tools file for that song. When it's time for me to chart, I always have my Pro Tools session open, play it through, and while I'm charting, I'll go ahead and leave markers within the Pro Tools session. And the reason that I do that is so that if we have to jump into a specific section or punch into a specific part, I can easily navigate to that section without having to like scrub through it and waste time. But then also, aside from the laptop things, I'll make sure that gain staging is correct, routing is correct, tuning is correct, and anything else that needs to change, like mic placement or even drum selection or cymbal selection, prior to the clients getting to the studio, so that it can just be ready to go and we can hit the ground running when they get there. One thing that I actually did end up changing that I didn't do the night before was I actually added a snare top mic, but then I put a spacer. I added a spacer just so that there's no vibration from the two microphones, just to keep it completely isolated, so that the two microphones don't rub against each other, making any unwanted sound. And all I did to make the spacer was I took an empty Moon gel container and just put that in between and gaff taped the two microphones so they were spaced apart. For almost all my sessions, I like to set up a ribbon microphone for a room, not because it sounds great or it sounds massive. It definitely sounds like a small room, but I do it for two reasons. One, for the in-ear monitors, I want to be able to hear what the drums are doing within the room, and number two, it gives the sound engineer just what this room specifically sounds like. Now, if they want to use that or not, that's totally up to them. But for my purposes, it's mostly for monitoring and to give me an accurate representation of what is going on in my room. And for the microphone, I normally use a figure 8 pattern ribbon microphone. Another thing that I like to do is I like to have a couple of different monitoring situations for clients, whether that be a producer and a writer, or if it's just a producer, I like to have more than one monitor solution for them so that they can pick what one they're most comfortable with. And for this session, I actually ended up using one headphone monitor out for myself, the second one was for the producer, and then I had the writer also, so I went ahead and took two outs from my interface and ran it to a Behringer personal mixer, and she was able to hear using some headphones I had lying around. Just set up these monitors for the producer and for the writer. Go into my clarinet right over there. Now, depending on the client, some have specific drum tones in their head prior coming to the studio, and then some don't have any drum tones and they're looking to me to kind of find what works for them and be able to just deliver really solid drums to them. Knowing that this session was going to be a CCM type of thing, I went ahead and grabbed an Evans E-ring out of my closet and I slapped it on the snare drum. That's kind of my go-to when I'm getting like a CCM rock kind of sound. I don't want a ton of overtones versus country. I want a little more overtones and I want the drum to be a little more live because that fits the genre better. But because I knew it was a CCM song and a CCM style of music, I went ahead and muffled to what I know works in this room for that specific genre. The sessions I did today, we had to hunt for the sounds a little bit more. I changed a couple of tunings on the toms, but overall everything was pretty dialed in before they got there. Once all of that's good, then we go ahead and start recording. Now, since I go ahead and chart things before the client gets there most of the time, if I have access to the songs prior to the client arriving, then I will hit the record button and kind of get a first pass. One, to make sure that all the sounds are meshing well with the song itself, and two, just to kind of get things warmed up and get everybody acclimated to this environment and get their mixes dialed in and everything else, because if your mix isn't great, it makes it a lot harder to be able to see the overall vision and the overall picture of what we're trying to capture for this specific song. Once our first pass is done, then we kind of review it, listen back, and go over what we liked, what we didn't like, and I'll take notes normally on my iPad or just add notes to my existing charts on my iPad, depending on how many notes there are. We'll then start actually getting proper takes and proper passes. As you can tell in this Pro Tools session right here, if I open the playlists, we did a lot of different takes and everything else. We basically had 2 solid takes at the top, and then the third and fourth take we just worked on the back half of the song. But if you look at this comp track, if I zoom in right here, you can really tell that I did a lot of copying and pasting of different parts just to make it feel a little bit better and to make it feel more stable. And sometimes the session just works like that, where you have to literally just take it section by section and get a couple of solid takes on each section and paste things and everything else to get one solid comp track. And the first song was a good example of having to really work for the parts and really dig to find the best thing that fit that song. Once we got a really solid take and I got everything put together on the comp track, after that, I like to actually do a fun take. I want there to be a lot of contrast between the solid take that we just got and the fun take that I did. And for this, what I ended up doing, instead of having the snare land on 3 and kind of giving it a halftime feel, for the fun take, I did the exact opposite and I put everything on 2 and 4 to give the song a different voice. But like I said before, this was just the fun take. Once they had the take that they were comfortable with and they envisioned, I went ahead and tracked my own take, or my version of what I think the drum part should be for this song. Either one is right and neither one is wrong. It's just different flavors and different inspirations and everything else. And sometimes that can give you a really cool balance. Now all I'm gonna do is just select all, and then I'm gonna consolidate to make it all one. I chopped everything up and now I'm gonna glue it back together. What is this? Glue it back together. For the second song, I actually ended up changing my hi-hats out, and I always like to have things easily accessible so that if we need to make a quick change, I can do that really fast and get right back to recording to not mess up the flow or anything else for that specific session. Because sometimes once you get the ball rolling and it stops, it's hard to get it started again. So I want that to be as fast as I possibly can. And for this session, like I said, I needed to change the hi-hats to something smaller for the second song because it was more 16th note driven. Once I have all the tracks the way I want them, it's time to send them off to the producer. And to do that, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to commit the tracks in Pro Tools, and what that basically is going to do is that's going to print any processing from like plugins and stuff like that onto the track and create new tracks for me with those plugins printed on them. Once that happens, I'm going to go to the project folder and go to audio And honestly, all I do is I just click on date added and find the ones that are the most recent or the ones that have .cm on them, put them in the folder that I created with the song title and drums. That way they know it's the drum files for that song on my desktop. Once I do that, I create a new folder in Dropbox and I just upload those files to Dropbox and share that folder with whoever needs access to it and let them download those files. And that's basically it. It's not super difficult. Everybody's workflow is gonna look a little bit different, but that's just my workflow as of recently. If you found this video helpful and you enjoyed it, feel free to hit the like button down below or leave a comment on if you liked it, or if you do something different, let me know what you do different, because I would love to hear how people do this, and honestly maybe get some ideas from y'all. And if you haven't yet, feel free to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all the new videos I post on this channel. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video.